Hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we are back with another installment in the Mythic plus Dungeon Guide series. Today we are looking at the Warlord Parjesh encounter, which I find to be one of the best examples of the purpose of this series. The fight on low difficulties is extremely straightforward and quick, but on high difficulties, including Tyrannical, you begin to see just how many people don't properly understand these mechanics. There's only really two mechanics on the whole encounter that anyone needs to be aware of at any time, and the first one that happens will always be call reinforcements. This mechanic is a prime example of ways you can mess up a challenging encounter, so let's go into detail about exactly what it entails. The mechanic will spawn two additional targets each time it's used. One of them is a male melee ad known as a Shellbreaker, and the other is a female caster ad known as a Crest Rider. On their own, they are each relatively easy to kill and pose a little danger to the group, which typically lulls the damage dealers in the group to a false sense of security involving the ads. Typically, these targets die very quickly, but on higher difficulties, it may take quite a bit of effort if you do intend to kill them. They each have a casted ability that needs to be interrupted or prevented at all costs, but almost no one ever does this in my experience. The Shellbreaker will use Bellowing Roar, which will increase his damage by 15%, including subsequent casts, and do some damage. The Crest Rider will cast Restoration, which will effectively heal the boss and any other targets. If these casts get off, you have made a severe mistake in the encounter that can easily result in a wipe, especially in high Mythic plus Tyrannical. It should also be known that the Crest Rider casts a Lightning Strike ability that deals nature damage to the target, but this ad cannot be tanked with conventional threat. She will cast the ability on random targets, oftentimes dealing a lot of damage to the healer, and on high Tyrannical this can really hurt. Knowing all this, the most prudent option is seemingly to just kill the two ads as quickly as possible, but this complicates the second mechanic known as Impaling Spear. A large red arrow will come out from the boss and collide with the first target possible, whether player or ad, stunning it and dealing a large amount of damage. Conventionally, the idea here is to have an ad on the encounter get hit to avoid the group from dealing with it entirely, but just having the ads sit alive means a lot more interrupts may be needed. There are two ways to easily deal with this mechanic, and oftentimes in pugs it will require a bit of both to be successful here. Option number one is to leave the caster ad alive and burn the melee ad as soon as possible. Ideally, you would CC the caster ad with an ability like Paralyze for monks, or any other appropriate hard CC to make sure it does not wander into the group or hurt anyone else. Then when the arrow is out, the person it's on must run behind the ad. This can be difficult as the ads spawn randomly, but it is the way it appears the fight was intended to be done. Any other permutations of this will work, of course, including leaving the melee ad alive or simply trying to kill them both but lacking the DPS to do so. This strategy fails if at any point the spear fails to hit the target designated, and you will immediately get a second ad and will have to kill the previous set in order to execute the strategy. Option number two is to quickly nuke down both ads in order to avoid their mechanics and any complications that might arise with multiple sets being up from poor execution or low DPS. Then the spear is handled by the group's utility itself. A short list of ways to handle it would be to have any type of immunity soak the spear, or any immunity to the stun that could be used as well. Ideally, a physical immunity would be used, as non-tanks would still likely take a large portion of their health in damage. Things like Ice Block, Bop, or Bubble, and Icebound Fortitude, especially as Blood Decay, all work. Remember, any paladin can place Bop on another person, so that may actually save a death if someone fails to get to their target for the first strategy we talked about. My preference here is option number two, as I've seen many people neglect the cast on the ads, and especially the restoration can become a huge complication. As long as you have any immunities, you should always be able to do this strategy. The fight has one other mechanic that oftentimes results in deaths, known as Crashing Wave, and the subsequent placement of quicksand after it. It is the tank's job to make sure he is facing a direction you can feel comfortable with, and then quickly getting out of the sand. It should never kill the tank, but what does seem to happen way too often is the melee getting clipped by it. I believe what is likely happening is they are too close to the back or sides of his hitbox, but be aware that if you are ever in front of the boss, you are playing a very risky game. If this is true, the best way to prevent these accidental deaths is to make sure you're at max melee directly behind the boss, if not simply moving out of melee range for a second. Then be sure to avoid running through the quicksand and attempt to have the quicksand in a place on the edge of the room so ads don't also wander through it. The boss also features a standard 30% enrage where he gains 30% more haste, making survival of melees potentially much more dangerous, but this should not complicate indicate anything else worth discussing. This fight is an ideal candidate for Bloodlust at the start of the dungeon, as the quicker you burn through the health wall, the less adds and spears you will have to deal with, no matter how you deal with them. Going into this fight, be sure you never get clipped by the crashing wave, and be sure you are ready to interrupt the adds as often as possible to ensure a smooth encounter. Classes with CC or immunity should step up to show the group you intend to handle the mechanics, just in case, in order to prevent any mistakes. If anyone knows of any other ways specific specs and classes can influence this encounter, please let me know. Otherwise, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Thanks for watching, and see you guys in the next video.